All right, so the brushes that we're going to be using today are the small round, a medium round, a medium or large flat, depending on what's in your bucket, and a medium small flat, depending on what is in your bucket. And we will use the fan brush. And if you have this one that has a beveled edge, we will also use that one as well. Today, when we start out, I am going to use the medium flat to begin with. Is everybody ready to go? No, not quite yet. So when we get I'm just going to talk about watercolors as before we start demoing. When I get my watercolors, the first thing I'd like to do, and let's say you're using watercolors and nobody used them from a previous class. Oh, should I wait a moment? Does everybody got their brushes? Yep. 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 Sorry, I went too fast. I'm so excited today.
I know you are.
So I have this small round, I have a medium round. I have a medium flat or medium small, depending on what's in your bin. I have a larger flat. I have a fan brush. And I have this one that has a beveled edge. Now, you guys have a lot of brushes in your bin, right? And the reason you have a variety is for when we start doing our final watercolor, you probably will expand your horizons beyond the brushes that I am showing you, because you'll get the basic idea from the small rounds to the large rounds to the small flats to the large flats. Okay? All right, so I'm going to begin. I am grabbing, you got to be with me. I'm going to grab my medium flat. With that being said, I have my smaller set of watercolors, and then I have a larger set of watercolors. I'm not going to be using this larger set today. Just as an FYI, I'm just going to be using this smaller set. When I begin, I always put just a little bit of water into each one of the colors I'm going to use. So today I'm using the primaries, red, yellow, and blue. If I wanted to use the secondaries, what are the secondary colors?
Orange, green, and violet.
Absolutely perfect. Orange, green, and violet. We are not going to be using brown or black today. Okay?
Do you mean the secondary ones as well?
I put a drop in.
Okay.
Yep. And I don't like to oversaturate them too much, especially with this class, because the previous class has just used the colors. Now, do you guys remember back in kindergarten when you first kind of experienced watercolors? It was, because nobody ever taught you how to use them. So the first thing I just want to talk about and just listen is that the difference with watercolors is you have to be aware of opaque and translucent. Opaque you can't see through, and translucent you can. So I'm just going to show you this little piece here that I have. You can see here at the bottom where it's thick and heavier is opaque, and as I lighten up with water, it becomes transparent or translucent. So this is basically the key to watercolors. is that control between opaque and translucent. And this is the bear in all of it. Because if it's too much water, it can run away. If it's too thick, it can be shiny and glossy and you can't read it. So this is where hopefully we can find that balance. All right, so we're gonna begin. And I'm going to take my flat brush and I am going to dip it into water to begin with. And I'm going straight to my blue paint. And can you guys see that? There we go. And remember, the colors on the smartboard do not read very well. That's just the way it is. So I'm going for the blue paint and I'm just working it over here because if it's too thin, it's going to be translucent. And if it's too thick, it's gonna be opaque. Everybody got that? So I want to find that happy medium. So what I'm doing is I'm working that brush back and forth. So I feel pretty good. And you can see on my brush, which maybe you can or cannot see on the smartboard, that the paint is starting to fill up the brush, right? So I'm going to put in a solid wash in. And this is where we're just starting to gain control of watercolors. So I'm just pulling a straight line across. And you see how clear and clean that is, right? And when I do this, a solid wash is really good for backgrounds. So it's really, you get this nice clear consistency. Now, do me a favor, when you do this, don't go all over the place. You're just pulling a solid line, easy peasy. And don't go up and down, just pulling a solid line across. Solid wash. We've gained control. We're starting to take the wheel and we're going to drive this car. All right, so now we're going to do a graded wash. Or should I stop? I'm going at a good pace? Okay, keep going. I'm going to keep going. So I still have this blue on my paintbrush. And this is going to get a little tricky. I'm going to pull this. I'm going to dip it into the water for just a brief second. And I'm going to pull a line across again. You can see it's a little bit more transparent, right? I'm going to dip back into the water. And I'm going to go over that line again. And then I'm going to go over the line again. And I'm going to start to angle the paper. And what's happening is, I probably got too much water there in the corner, is that we have this nice graded wash. And now I got a little bit too much water, I got a little overzealous there, and I'm picking it up with the paper towel. Did you see that little technique? How gentle and clean that was? And I didn't disrupt the surface. I just gently took my paper towel right to the corner. Super easy. So, that is a graded wash. Now if I wanted to kind of go over it and try to pull up a little bit more, I could go back over it to the bottom and just kind of work it and go right to the bottom and pull up the color with my paper towel. All right, so far everybody's good? All right, I'm gonna clean my brush off and I'm actually going to use the yellow now. And I still will continue to use the flat brush. So I want to make sure that the brush is clean, and it is, looks good. So I'm going into the yellow. So I've cleaned the brush, and I'm going into the yellow paint now. I wonder, did I not turn the light on? Yep, okay, it is. I'm picking up some yellow paint. And I'm going to put just a line across in glazing. Now we have to do some prep work because we need to have this dry so I can show you some techniques. So then I'm going to take the yellow and I'm going to put a little bit more water onto it. And I'm going to put it a little block in lifting and feathering. Just a little square block. All right, and then in negative space, I'm going to do the same thing. And then in Magic Eraser, I will do the exact same thing. And we need those to dry in order for us to move forward. All right, so we're gonna go to Wipeout next. And this is a really, oh, should I slow down? Okay, sorry. So you want, I get just so excited today. So you wanna make sure you put yellow down in glazing, negative, lifting and feathering, and magic eraser. You're just putting a blop down. And we're gonna layer the colors up, and I'm gonna show you how to do negative. But we need this to dry first before we can do any of the techniques. And the things that I'll show you, the paper that you guys have is a student grade watercolor paper. It is 90-pound cold press. That means it has a beveled kind of pockmarked surface. And it is kind of the cheap, the low end, the low grade of watercolor papers. When we do our final, we'll have 300-pound cold press paper, so it'll be thick and heavy. So if we make mistakes, we can kind of work through it. With this paper, we might have moments where we go, like it rips a hole in the paper just because it's cheap, but I'd rather have the cheap paper for the practice stuff than for our final. Does that make sense? Okay, so we might have a moment where our paper rips or something funny, weird happens. So the technique I want to show you, I want you to watch first before you do it. And this is called Wipeout. And this is a really good way to make clouds. And I'll go into clouds a little bit more detailed when we get closer to our practice landscape painting. So I'm gonna get my brush wet, and I'm dipping it into the blue at the moment and just kind of picking up the pigment. It's a little watery, but it's fine. All right, I think it'll be fine. In my hand, I'm gonna have a paper towel ready to go. And when I do it, I wanna have the white paper towels. It's fine for the brown, if you have the brown ones, that's what, just for today. But when you do a final one, you'll want the white paper towels. I am pretending I am putting in just a wash for the sky, right? And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start to scrub out underneath, and I'm starting to pick up the paint or the pigment, and I'm getting this nice little kind of cloud effect. So you can see how I can kind of work sections out. So go ahead and try that. Yeah, wipe out. So go ahead and try it. Yep. I'm going to use one of the things as a demo. Is that okay? That's perfect. Yep, and try to pull. See, it's so hard right now. It's getting too dry on you. So that's okay. Just to try. Yep, that's all that matters. Yeah, this is hard. Is it going okay? It's hard. It's just it just is. Yeah. Okay. You kind of get the idea. All right. So the next thing is you're going to have a container of salt in your bin, and just watch me first. I think you all have one that's already been opened with a piece of tape on it. So you'll want to open that one. But wait, watch first. So I'm gonna take my violet, and I'm using my flat brush, and I kind of want you to watch this all in one fell swoop, because you kind of need to make it happen in one fell swoop. So I don't know if you can see, I have a little bit of salt in my hands, and I'm getting my violet color. Violet, you're turning violet. All right. So, do you guys know what movie that's from?
Yeah.
It's such a classic. What is it? That one quote? The anticipation, I hope it lasts, or something like that. It's funny. It's a funny line. Funny movie. All right, so I'm throwing down the colors. I know Miss Hawker's not very funny today. And you can see it's really a rich color. Throwing that down. And I'm putting the salt right on top of it. And I know that this is really dark and it's hard to read, but in a little bit when this is dried up, the salt will pick up the color and will leave white dots behind. What this is really good for is doing sand or doing some kind of texture. And when you're done with it, make sure you take your blue tape and tape it up.
Ah, dang.
Got it? Yep. Push that color around. And so now we'll just sprinkle it so we can just let it dry now. And yeah, so it'll leave a nice texture. Cool, huh? Awesome. Okay. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna let that dry. And a little bit, we'll scrape it off.
Miss Hawker, do you have tape?
Oh, is there no tape in your bin?
Oh, yeah, right here.
So when you're done with the salt, close it back up with your piece of tape from your bin. Okay, we're gonna jump ahead to masking. So you're gonna take a piece of tape and you're just gonna kind of rip it in half, but try to give it a little movement up and down spots, and put them parallel to each other, or kind of make them funky. It's up to you. And then I'm gonna take another piece of tape, and I'm gonna take my scissors, and I'm just going to put in some other kind of funky shapes. I'll help you. You got it, friend. So we have this kind of more organic shape, and then we have these more geometric shapes. When you're done doing that, you need to look for the brush in your bin that has a beveled edge. One in your bin that has this beveled edge that has an angle on it. color yet.
Oh, nice.
We only have one of those?
Yep, you will only have one. Yep. The reason you only have one of those brushes, there might be somebody else who has maybe two of those brushes in your bin, is that they're meant for specifically for watercolor, but you use them to help push down and make sure that you are burnishing your edges of the masking tape so that the watercolor does not seep underneath the lines. So I'm kind of just pressing it down and working it so I don't have any leakage, because that's the worst and that can destroy your painting. Now, let's talk about the painter's tape that we're using. I use painter's tape for watercolors because you don't have, like with masking tape, you usually have to put it on your fabric to pull up some of the lint so it's less tacky, and that can still rip your paper. I use painter's tape because it's just this nice balance of tackiness. So you want to be careful when you're using it, but it's like this fine, you're walking the fine line. You need to make sure that you've pressed down all your edges. So once I've done that, I'm going to take my whatever color I so choose to use, and I'm going to use red because we haven't used red yet. And I am just going to paint over and in between those spaces. So I'm just kind of filling it in. So what I'm also need to do is I need to go back to glazing, negative, lifting and feathering, and magic eraser. But I can't go back to those until those are dry. And I need to know what's the best way to test to make sure they're dry, because if my finger gets on it and then you kind of leave a footprint behind or oils. So I always use the back of my hand to tell, and if it's cold, then I know that it's not ready to use. And mine are still cold, and I actually picked up some yellow paint. So I know it's not ready to mess with. So I'm gonna move on to detailed. And what detail I kind of like to talk about is our different brushes and how they work. And so we talked about in the beginning the small, medium, or the small rounds and the medium rounds. And we talked about that beveled edge there brush, plus the fan brush, plus the flat brushes, right? So let's talk about each one of those and what they can do. So we're gonna start with the baby one to begin with. This baby brush, this fine round, these are my favorite like cleanup ones. We use these just to get in the small, nice details. And they're great to have. They're lovely brushes, but it's really important that we take care of the tip of the paintbrush, the hairs. And when we're done, we kind of want to make sure when we put them away to kind of get the brush to all the bristles to go in the same direction and almost get them to a point so they're good. And I like to work with my brushes that way too, because it's really disconcerting when they split. That's a terrible moment. So I'm going to take my small round brush and I'm going to go into my orange, because we really haven't used any orange yet. And I'm just going to start at the top, and I'm just doing a nice fine line, pulling it across. We got it. We can see what this brush can do, right? Nice fine lines. So we know that this brush is not meant to fill in big spaces. This is just to do that nice little detail work. Clean that brush, put it side. Now I'm gonna go to my next round brush, and I'm gonna use the red now. I have it, and I can do a nice fine point again, right? Am I going too fast? Okay, I'll stop for a second. With that medium round, you'll see that we can get a fine point just like on the small one. But when we pull it to the side, we get a much thicker line. That is the medium round. All right. I'll take a moment to breathe and let you all catch up. Okay, I'm gonna grab my medium flat. Do I need to wait a minute? Are we good? Okay, good. So I'm gonna go into my green. I just wanna show you the different line qualities and things that can happen. Ooh, I got something like a hair or something on that one. All right. So with this flat, what's really nice is I can still do that nice straight line, and I can fill in wider spaces. Oops. Have a thirsty brush, not enough watercolor on there. So I can do that. But what's really cool is I can start to twist this and go back to a fine line too. That was not the best move there. There. And yes, I went into the water splats. Okay, so I'm going to clean that brush. And so that would be what a larger one would do, but let's talk about this beveled one now. Let's go into the blue. And I think when you're in school, you don't really talk about what each brush can do, and I think it's very important. Again, this blue one, or this beveled one, excuse me, you can pull a nice straight line, and then you can do a nice kind of angle with it, waves. All right, then last one we will do is the fan brush. Now this is going to be a little bit harder, and just because we don't have a large area just to kind of fan into. So I probably will scoot myself up into where my name is and hour, and I'll just do it up there. And I'm going to dip the brush into the water. And I'll show you, I will pick up some pigment or the watercolor. And I'm going to dip into the yellow. So I have the color on there. And what a fan brush is really nice for is for doing leaves on a tree, or bushes, or putting texture into a sand or something like that. And it kind of hits a lot of areas at once. All right, so now we will move on to water splats and blooms. So I'm gonna go into the yellow first, but I'm gonna need 2 brushes for this. I'm going to need a small or a round, either small or medium round, and I will need a medium or large flat. With the large flat, I'm grabbing the yellow color. And I got a little bit too much water, but it's okay. And I'm just gonna put a base coat of yellow down, and I will go over this green and all these other colors, so it might blend a little bit, but I'm okay with that. So I've dropped that color down. I'm going back in with my round with some red, and I am dropping it, and it should start to spread out. And it should just kind of blossom there. There it goes. And goes on its own. So what this is really nice to do is, like, if you have a field of flowers, you kind of drop those all in. And then you can layer another color on top of that. So I would take a green or a blue or whatever you want and throw it right down on where you did that color initially. I love doing that. It's just kind of fun to watch. All right. And I'm tested my other ones, and I think we're ready to go on those. All right, so we're ready for glazing. I'm gonna take a flat brush, and I'm gonna do the blue over the yellow. And glazing works from working from light to dark values. And what's gonna happen is I will take my blue, and I'm gonna just pull a line across it, and it's not gonna read the best on the smartboard. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. And what happens is when I cross that line, I'm going to get a green, and of course you really can't see it. But I will walk mine around so you can see it a little bit better. Yep, perfect. They're just kind of looking at how to layer colors. Just layering colors. So you're getting it green where it crosses. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So let's say on our watercolor we had a mistake happen, and that happens. So I want to show you a couple ways to repair a mistake. So I'm going to take my, sorry, I got to unfreeze it. I want to take a round brush, and I could use, it doesn't matter which brush I use. I could use a round or I could use a flat, it doesn't matter. But for this one, I'm just going to use a round. And I'm going to go over my lifting and feathering, and I'm just taking water, and you can see I had a water droplet on it, and I am just working the paint. I'm going to press with the paper towel, and I have lifted the color off. So you can see even what a little droplet of water can do. Now, let's say this edge is just, it's not working, it's too hard. I can take the brush and soften the edges. And at the same time, you can see I'm picking up the pigment as well. So I have to have my paper towel nearby so I can start pulling away the color. It's not going to totally take it away, but kind of scrubbing it in and working it out and lifting it off. Now this is where you guys might go through your paper and get a hole because it is a cheaper version. But it's a really nice technique also. It can help to add a little bit of value and depth to your painting. All right, now on to Magic Eraser. Since we're trying to remove stuff, I'm gonna take just a piece of tape and I'm gonna press it down. I wanna get rid of that section. Again, I wanna take my paintbrush that has a beveled edge and I wanna burnish that down. That means I wanna press it down. And now I'm going to take a magic eraser, and everybody has one of these, and they slowly fall apart and die on you. And when we start our final one, I obviously will have more, but we take it, we dip it in water, you squeeze out the water, and now I'm going to work this edge over. And I am lifting that yellow paint right off. And you might have paper peel up on you, but when you use the good paper for your final, you'll realize that it won't peel up on you. And then I'm just gonna kind of blot and clean, and then I can pull off the tape, and then I have that nice sharp edge. Yep. So I'm going to take a piece of tape, I burnish the edges with either my finger, but I actually prefer to use the paintbrush. I take my magic eraser, I dip it in water, I squeeze out all the water, and then I just slowly kind of pull up the color. And I'm not scrubbing back and forth. It's more like swipe and lift, swipe and lift, swipe and lift, and then I can remove the tape. And it doesn't completely take it up, but it does a really nice job if you have an oopie moment. And believe me, we all might have that moment. All right, so the other thing we can do right now too is take the tape off on our masking. And see how we got nice sharp edges there. Nice and clean shapes. This is really good for like you want to make sure that you're doing an area like a tree and you don't want it to bleed into your sky. It's a nice way of covering up different sections of your paper. Right. So we're going to go to negative, and I'm going to take a round brush. And what color haven't we really used yet? We will use the green. And what negative space is for is a lot of illustrators, they kind of they block in areas, and what's really nice is you can block in this color, just going around your edges, right? But you could also use it for layering trees. So let's see if I had trees I want to do, or bushes, or I want to do my initials in it as well. I could do the letter K over this for my first name. And what we're doing is we're just trying to cover up that yellow. We're just trying to make it kind of block in. And cover up that yellow. And it's just another way to add depth to your watercolor, just layering the colors up. All right, after this, I want you to take a moment to clean up and do a nice job. And this is how it needs to happen. One of your partners will go to the sink and wash out the brushes. Make sure you put them away with the bristles up. Leave your boxes of paints open so they dry. This is the unfortunate thing that happens. If you close them up, sometimes the color spills out because they don't know that it's wet. So I want you to put them away with the boxes open. Throw your paper towels away and then leave these on your desk, and then I'll tell you what to do. Okay?